About MindMajix, we have around 10 years of experience in training, 9+ years of experience in serving e-learning industries, and then we have 500+ technologies delivering live online trainings, corporate trainings, and self-placed videos. We also have around 450k professionals who have got trained from multiple domains and multiple industries, and we have 110+ reputed corporate around the globe who are tied up with us. Okay, so I'll just go to the next slide. We have 5+ years of experience into IT technical training, including SharePoint, administration, development, Office 365, identity and access management. Also worked as SSO into SSO integration with multiple products like Okta, Confederate, Ping1, ForgeRock. I have 8+ years of experience in the cybersecurity and IAM technical training with product knowledge of Ping, Okta, OneLogin, Microsoft, SecureAuth, and RSA. I've also worked into and trained people and corporates into cloud platforms like AWS and Azure. Today's agenda. So today we are going to talk about IAM as an introduction, and then we are also going to cover authorization and authentication. We will slightly do a high level of what single sign-on is before jumping into Okta, and then we'll do a little bit of SAML Basics. I'll also try to cover OpenID Connect. That is also one of the key protocol, and then walk you through introduction of Okta. Okay? The course curriculum here consists of introduction, single sign-on, concepts of SAML, OIDC, OAuth, WSFed, form-based authentication, Okta Universal Directory, advanced group management, configuration of external directories. How are we going to connect external directories to Okta? We are about to see how do we manage applications within Okta. We have multiple suites of applications that we are going to manage. Provisioning, custom application integration, workflows within Okta, how workflows are configured and they help individual perform authentication, and the Okta policies and its framework. The duration, this course, the entire course, what are you going to exactly learn within this course? It is Okta as a platform which easily adopts the latest apps, centralize user management, and automate access workflows across cloud, on-prem, and mobile applications. It also helps you integrate many applications, like there are around 6,500 plus application and provision user around roughly around a million on cloud and on-prem applications. Human resource information system, automate onboarding through offboarding based on HR updates and triggers. Whenever there is an update into any of the system, the sync, how do we perform those things? How do we manage them? Infrastructure as a service, IaaS. Securely connect IT and developers to public cloud computing services, centralize identity, and add strong multi-factor authentication across hybrid IT systems. So currently in the trend of the cybersecurity wherein systems are getting compromised, how do we make sure that the users have a validation, that to a 2 level of validation before they try to access any of the application. API gateway is one of the most trending thing in any cloud platform, and then ID proofing, protect against identity spoofing with risk-based authentication. So all these are again a part of MFA, multi-factor authentication. Scope of the technology. Okta has emerged as a leader in identity and access management. Okta Integration Network has different services available under one platform, including single sign-on that we are going to cover definitely, multi-factor authentication, MFA, user management, workflows, APIs, and access gateways. Companies like Nasdaq, Siemens, Hitachi, T-Mobile, Adobe, etc. have partnered with Okta as their IAM solution. So you can imagine the vastness of Okta and the robustness of how Okta is providing solution across multiple domains and across multiple industries. The IAM Okta Technical Training certifications. So we have something called as Okta Certified Professional, Okta Certified Administrator, and Okta Certified Consultant. And the next level you have, and then that is the level like a professional administrator and a consultant. And then you have a Certified Developer, which deals mostly around APIs, SDKs, and developers would mostly be interested. But if you are an administrator, wanted to do deep dive into the technical bits, integration, implementation, the above professional certification path will suit you more. This is the course completion certificate that MindMajix is going to provide you. Now, I am Okta Technical Training. Some of the random topics that we are going to cover here would be cloud-based solution versus an on-prem solution, API, how APIs can be used, and then usually as a business analyst, how do we think when we try to integrate any application, perform a data validation before it is actually moved into the technical bits? What are the questions that you need to ask? How do we look around issues around onboarding any of the application into any system? So that's a primary role of a business analyst. So thinking like a business analyst is something that we are planning to cover here. I am Okta Technical Training. So there are a lot of multiple projects. One of the key projects here would be Salesforce SSO integration, integrate Salesforce with Okta SSO to manage users centrally. So we will definitely help you with setting a lab within Okta as well as in Salesforce, and then we will help you with a dev account, Okta Dev Console, automate user onboarding through APIs. So as Okta being a cloud tenant, there are a lot of usages of APIs that we are going to learn here. and a few of the projects would involve playing around with these APIs. Some of the technical training lab setup that we would need as a prerequisite, we need a developers console, an enterprise console, and Azure VM for IWA and directory integration. IWA is integrated Windows authentication through which you actually perform SSO or desktop SSO. So as such, there is no system requirement because all are cloud-based, so you don't need a VM or something installed in your system. We'll try to make sure everything is on cloud and we'll help you install everything. In terms of documentation and additional courses, we will share you the session videos, the documentation, useful references, sample resumes, resume preparation guide will also be a part of the course. We'll walk you through or help you with some of the mock interviews, be it in the engineering section or be it in the implementation or as an analyst. From level 1 to kind of an architect level will help you based on the target requirement. Please feel free to drop your query at info@mindmajix.com. So this was like a very overview wherein I tried to cover details around how MindMajix would help you sail through this particular training module. And now I'm going to actually talk about a little bit of what IAM is, what single sign-on, types, SAML, and then deep dive a little bit higher level into the multiple topics that I'm going to cover in the entire duration of the course. So I'm just stopping my sharing and I'll reshare again. So now, what is an identity? An identity is the details of an individual. For example, your username, your IDs, those are your identity. Who you are, what are you authorized to? All these concepts is something that defines your identity. Identity and access management. Now there is your ID. You have to enter any location within your building. You can go in, try to swipe in multiple places, but your card will work. The first thing is security verifying your card. That is authentication is happening. Then you're trying to swipe into different doors, into different swipe machine, and you will only be authorized to one specific door that you are a part of. That is something called as authorization. So in order to manage your identity and the level of access that you have, we use tools. For example, for identity management, we use certain set of tools like SailPoint. For access management, we use tools like OKTA Training. Authentication. Authentication is basically telling proving actually who you are and you say you are. So what I mean by that is you must be saying that you are an individual. Your name could be Sam, but how do you prove that? Using an ID or using a username and a password. Now, whether your password is true or false, that will again be validated either by the security guard or by the Active Directory. Authorization. Now, once you know who you are, it is the level of access that you have. That is something we call as authorization. Again, I'm just going to touch very high level. We are going to cover these things in detail. And identity and access management, these authentication, authorization is something that you are going to deal within the course. So provisioning, it is actually the initial start of a user life cycle. Time a user is provisioned or created within any system, that is what we call as provision. So right from provisioning to granting access to authorizing a user to performing auditing and then the deprovisioning. That's what we define as the user life cycle management. Single sign-on, one of the primary topic why we need OKTA. So single sign-on is, imagine you join any organization and you are given with a set of credentials. You log into one app or your system and from there, boom, you try to log into all 100, 200 application or a set of application that you are authorized to with a single set of username and password. That is called single sign-on. Now, how? It is because of few of the browser functionality as well as the relationship between your IDP, OKTA, and the application which we call as S. Trust that is already been built between the identity provider and service provider is actually facilitating you to do the single sign-on. Now, authentication, it determines whether a user or who claim they be, usually done before authorization, generally transmits ID token. Okay, I am not going to talk about the ID token and OpenID now. We are anyways going to cover them in detail. Authorization determines whether a user can or cannot access, verifies whether access is allowed through policies and rules, usually done after authentication. That is, when you are done with the authentication, next thing is authorization. What are we going to cover within SAML? We are going to cover federation, SSO reviews, SSO for single domain, SSO for multiple domain, identity provider, service provider. What is SAML? Now, SAML is one of the key important things that helps you perform single sign. So in that, how do we perform single sign-on? One of the protocol, I would say. So security assertion markup language is SAML, and it actually tries to create a trust between applications. It, in the sense, OKTA tries to create a trust within an application and it transfers data, and the data transfer happens through a SAML assertion. Now, there are different components of a SAML and different components of a SAML assertion. Now, during the initial way when the trust are been built, there are some data that gets exchanged. That data is called a metadata. Now, we are going to definitely go in deep and understand what a metadata file looks like, how a metadata is, what details are contained, why is it encrypted. There are different mechanisms which you have to use in order to encrypt. It depends on the different multiple products that we are going to. Identity federation, that is you being an identity provider as an identity provider as an Okta, they will not have the details. They would have if they are provision users, but if they are not using provision, they'll not have a detail. So where is the validation happening? That validation is happening against the AD. Now, even on the service provider side, they should have certain details of the users that is trying to log in. So identity provider, when it tries to fetch details from AD, goes to the service provider and dumps the data there. How is service provider validating? What is the key important thing, a unique identifier that the service provider should have in order to validate and authorize a user? Because authentication will be done by the identity provider. So these all process and steps will be discussed in detail. SAML, again, a standard XML based message sent over HTTPS. We have SAML 2.0 that's currently running. We also had 1.0 and 1.1. This is how an assertion would look like. Again, it's a very high level. We will use troubleshooting tools to understand how SAML assertion and all those things would look like. Again, it's an open protocol, like the authorization protocol. There are few components. I'll again go in very high level. We have components like resource owner, resource server, auth server, client ID, secrets, which are being shared. So ideally, we have a client, we have a resource server, resource owner, and an auth server, and then the user trying to access resource within the resource server. So whenever a user tries to access any resource, client actually does and actually requests for us kind of a code to the auth endpoint. That is the first endpoint that it hits. Second, the client again has to go back and then hit the token endpoint to request for a token. Now, how do we validate whether a user, again, how do we do the authentication? So OAuth is authorization protocol, wherein we have something called as access token. But when we use authentication, we have something called as OpenID Connect, a layer on top of OAuth. That itself contains tokens, and the primary token it uses to authenticate a user is called as an ID token. ID token, similar to a SAML assertion, not exactly, but the information that a SAML assertion contains, the attribute, we can configure the ID token to contain the same set of information. And that is where access token has less information of the user. It just gives you a basic of what the user is authorized, but an ID token gives you all the detail of who the user is, what are the attributes and detail of the user, so that it can be again used for an authentication purpose. Okay? And then we have multiple 4 grant types for OAuth or OpenID. We are going to discuss them in detail and also talk about what is the best grant type that we use industry-wide. This is a basic flow of a browser and an application trying to go to Okta's resource server and authorization server to actually request for a token, and how the validation is happening, and then what check happens on the different levels of a resource server, on the authorization server, and the token. This is the overview of Okta, the Okta dashboard, and we are going to give you access. So here, if you can see, we have dashboard, directories, applications, security, workflows, reporting, settings. And then here on the dashboard, we can see the status of the apps that we have onboarded. We can search people, we can search application. On the right hand side, we can also verify the health of the directories that you are going to integrate. And this is how a classic UI would look.